Here now is part two of my conversation with Scott Moses, Managing Director at PJ Solomon and head of their grocery, pharmacy, and restaurant practice. So one of the things I know that now you're in Connecticut now for the summer. Um, one of the places that you have gone has been Stu Leonard's, and I've written a lot about Stu Leonard's here on Morning News Beat. And one of the things to me that was really impressive about Stu's and it still continues to be during the pandemic, is how, because it has a much smaller SKU count, 1,200 SKUs, its supply chain was both smaller, and because they had direct relationships with a lot of their suppliers, stronger than the supply chains that a lot of other retailers had. And that was one of the things that I think kept people coming back to Stu's, is you knew they were going to have plenty of meat, plenty of seafood, plenty of produce. And, occasionally they'd run out of toilet paper, but nobody was really going to Stu Leonard's for toilet paper anyway. Do you think that is a model that more retailers are taking serious? I've read stories about this, that retailers are saying, yeah, we need to look at our SKU count and do SKU rationalization and cut down a little bit. I've heard SKU rationalization for 30 years, and I don't know how seriously to take it. Do you think retailers are starting to take that notion seriously?
Yes. And we've had a few clients that have done some pretty significant SKU rationalization work, and it's meaningfully changed how they serve their customers. And they've done so in a much more profitable way. Think about it. The fewer SKUs you have, the more you can buy of the individual SKUs that you do buy. And as such, you can buy so at a lower cost and therefore sell at a higher profit. Makes perfect sense. And those who have implemented those strategies, I think, have done really well. I mean, how many kinds of mustard do you need? On Stu Leonard's, though, I actually think there's a broader story there for me. So you're right. We're spending the summer here in Connecticut. We're very lucky to be able to do that. And I was eager to go to Stu Leonard's for the first time, in no small part because of how much you've talked about it. And we've loved it. And we do most of our work around the country with family businesses. And there is a secret sauce to what the best family businesses do around the country, which is they recognize that they're never going to beat Walmart on price. They're never going to beat Amazon on convenience. Where they win is on experience and trust, on leveraging that family ethos and making their customers' families want to be a part of it. We and my family, a jaded New Yorker, okay, we want to be a part of what Stu Leonard's is doing right now. And we go almost every weekend and we love it. And it is a perfect example of, in my view, the pathway to being successful in the stores and retaining customers for all the right reasons. And so we've been incredibly pleased with the work there, because you got to remember, the sector still faces three main challenges, okay, especially during a difficult economic time. Price, from a macro perspective, all the competition from a microeconomic perspective, and the difference in cost of capital between the largest guys like Amazon, Walmart, Target, and Costco, and everybody else. And so it's so important to be able to work through that difference, because on a cost of capital basis, Amazon and Walmart, they're AA at minus and AA respectively. That means they borrow cheaper than most countries. Amazon today is worth about $1.7 trillion. Earlier this morning, they were up about 5% on their earnings. That $1.7 trillion is radically more than all of the grocery sector is worth combined. That's Walmart, Target, Costco, CVS, Walgreens, Kroger, Ahold, Publix, you name it, all together. Amazon is worth radically more than all of them. In fact, Amazon's value increase just since the Whole Foods acquisition is well over $1 trillion. They're up 50% just this year during the pandemic. So any way you look at it, they've got an enormous advantage. They're delivering next day. It costs them over $1 billion a quarter. Well, $1 billion next to a $1.7 trillion valuation is 6 basis points. That's 0.06%. It might work, it might not work, but it raises the bar for everybody else. It raises customer expectations, and it costs Amazon next to nothing. It doesn't even move the needle. So there has to be a way that our typical regional supermarket can fight back. And Stu Leonard's, and there are others around the country who are doing a super job doing the same thing. They are a great example of that.
To me, people who argue that Whole Foods it is not a successful acquisition because Whole Foods has kind of lost a step compared to where it was before Amazon acquired it. To me, they're just missing the point, right? Because, clearly, I mean, they continue to do very, very well. Amazon learns from them. It gives them Amazon all sorts of capabilities that it didn't have before. And I'll tell you, I mean, you talk about how your shopping habits have changed since the pandemic. I had never used Prime Now pickup until the pandemic. And I've got a Whole Foods that's, quarter mile from my house. And I have gotten used to the ideas, I go online for tonight's dinner and I choose what I want, and I can, and as long as I spend more than $35, it's a free service. You can't buy anything at Whole Foods and not spend $35. I drive down the street, they put it in the trunk of my car, I drive back, and it's great. And it's fresh food. Yeah. It has become a life-changing sort of offering. And so I'm totally with you. Let me ask you another question, which is on the West Coast, in one of these deals I know you were part of, you've got New Seasons in Portland, and you've got Metropolitan Market in Seattle, and then you've got Bristol Farms in LA, all of which have been acquired by a Korean company, which basically, as best I can tell, it is not messing around with them. It is providing them with the capital to be able to continue to offer their differentiated offering on an ongoing basis. They're in better shape now than they were because they've got this underpinning. A, is that an accurate reading of the situation? And B, do you think those are the kinds of deals we're going to see more of?
Yeah, it is an accurate read. And look, that is a great transaction. We're really proud to have been a part of. It's going to be successful in no small part because the different banners and the teams who are there, they're wonderful people. Both the Good Food and New Seasons, really great folks. And the folks at eMart are great folks. The thesis is to have a geographically diversified set of specialty-oriented banners and to leverage eMart's lower cost of capital, because they're a multi-billion-dollar company, publicly traded in Korea, leverage that to help make these businesses better, and then I would imagine, create an even stronger platform over time. That's the thesis. Candidly, and look, I'm in the merger business, so full disclosure, but that fact doesn't make these facts less true. Scale matters. I think I mentioned about 65% statistically of a company's credit rating is determined by scale. The larger you are, the better your credit rating. The better your rating, the cheaper you borrow. And customer acquisition and retention is all about cost of debt. And so being able to take one's business and become part of a larger family of businesses is actually, we've found, is a path to preserving one's ability to serve customers and to continue to be pillars of their respective communities. And there are countless examples around the country, having worked opposite all of them. We've sold businesses to Kroger, Albertsons, SuperValu, UNFI, Aldi, Lidl, Sprouts, you name it. All of them, I think, are earnest in their desire, not just to create value, because that's their job, but also to actually make these stores better, to serve their communities and their teams better. And every one of those experiences, I would argue, has done that. And it's enabled all of these folks, candidly, to fight back against Walmart and Amazon, who, if you think about this pandemic, are probably doing better than everybody else combined.
Well, one of the things I've always I've appreciated about you and your practice, and I'm not blowing smoke here, is that you take that notion of local jobs and the whole notion of being a community pillar very seriously. You're not just a guy who just cashes the makes the deal, cashes the check, and then sort of moves on. Gordon Gekko, you're not. So I think
notwithstanding the dire need for a haircut, which I'm always in dire need of a haircut. During a pandemic, I'm hoping everyone will give me a pass.
I think so. So let me ask you one last question, which is this. Is there a question that you think retailers should be asking themselves at this particular point in time? Not saying everybody's not asking themselves, but is there a specific question that retailers, we're 5 months into a pandemic, we don't know when it's going to end. Clearly the economic numbers are not good. We have no idea how that's going to shake out. What will be the shape and the length of any kind of recession we're going to deal with? There's, God knows, there's social unrest, there's political uncertainty, there's so much going on. I would say, who would have figured that the pandemic would only have been the second or third biggest story this year? So is there a question in that context that you think retailers need to be asking themselves as they move forward?
Yeah. At a time when we've got 1919, 1929, 1968, 1974, all wrapped together into one year, I actually think the question that folks should be asking is the same they should always be asking, which is to look out into the future and do the work, the analysis that we always do with boards and management teams, which is to say, what is the most likely path for your business? And what's the upside, what's the downside, and why? How are your competitors going to react to that path or those paths, and why? And how are you going to react to that? And if people were taking a clear-eyed view as they develop that calculus and do what we call the present value of that future set of cash flows because of how your business will look based on those factors, that ultimately dictates what folks ought to do today. Frankly, it's the benchmark against which any strategic or financial decision ought to be made. What are going to be the implications of that? How are people going to react? And what are your regional macro inputs to that calculus? Because they are different. And if folks follow that rule, things tend to go, I think, pretty well as they are evaluating their decisions.
I think a subset of that, and maybe I'm saying the same thing, I'm just saying it differently, but it seems to me that one of the questions that retailers ought to ask themselves is, what are my strengths? And then be better at those. What are my weaknesses? And then make a decision. I either have to minimize my weaknesses or I have to turn them into strengths. I have to address it. But not, and going forward, that's something that, because if you build on your strengths and you minimize your weaknesses, if you do it well, you're going to actually put yourself in a better position for the future that you're talking about.
You're absolutely right. And part of the analyses we typically do with our clients is the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And if you have a clear-eyed view, not a Pollyannish view, but a clear-eyed view of what those weaknesses and threats really are, I tend to think it helps folks make better decisions. That's certainly our job, to help them do that.
Well, Scott, this has been fascinating. As always, you are a pleasure to talk to. I always walk away from these conversations smarter than when I went in, which is how I gauge the success of any conversation. I'm sure our audience will feel the same way. And I hope we can catch up with you down the road and maybe do this again. I don't know, when we're 8, 9, 10, God, I hope we're not 12 months into a pandemic, but maybe we can do it down the road again.
Well, hopefully in person. And the one thing I would just say, we are really lucky to be a part of this sector. I mean, I don't know how you feel. To be able to be just a really small part of the great work that all of our friends around this industry have done, I don't know how I could feel more proud and more honored to be a part of something. We should all really be grateful, and hopefully reward folks not just with gratitude, but with a lifetime of loyalty. What this sector has done has been incredible.
I hope it continues. I think that the notion of, I guess the thing I think about a lot is the notion of being essential. I think about it in my business. I'm sure you think about it in your business, and I know that companies are thinking about what essential means. And I'm going to be fascinated as we come out the other end of this to see how that word is redefined by the really progressive and ambitious and aggressive companies that are really that are not willing to just coast and not willing to outsource important stuff, how do they define essential? I think that's going to be interesting.
I completely agree. And I'm looking forward to seeing it happen.
We'll see you down the road. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. Be well.